Chapter 666, Afternoon Town. That's. Klein's eyes reflected a nearly transparent object. It appeared like a carapace of something, occasionally shrinking and vanishing from Klein's line of sight, and at times peeking out due to an invisible wind revealing some of its outlines. With it acting as an anchor point and looking further up, there were colors of green that was almost black, standing there silently. They looked like the colors of the trees of a dark forest. Klein mumbled without imagining what the object of those colors signified. All he could do was boldly guess that it had something to do with gaining a deeper control of the mysterious space above the gray fog. Without trying to do something that was destined to be in vain, he jumped down from the staircase that seemed to lead to heaven and phased back inside the palace. With the existence of Queen Mystic in mind, Klein did some simple tidying up before leaving the gray fog and returning to his bathroom. After tying up the loose ends, he walked to his suitcase, took out the sun brooch, and wore it on his double-breasted frock coat. After all the turmoil he had been through, the mystical items he could now use had returned to the state when he was in Backland. However, he was already a Sequence 5 and possessed one of the most difficult powers to deal with below that of the demigods. He was, in the true sense of the word, a powerhouse in the Beyonder world. I should be very agitated and happy, but I'm actually not. I'm even as excited as when I found mermaids. This is because I've just taken another step on my road to revenge. The true goal I wish to achieve is still a distance away. Following this, I should conclude the principles and digest the Mariontist potion and seek out the corresponding sequence for formula and ingredients. Yes, I can only do all of these things after leaving these waters. Next, I'll seek advice from Mr. Azik, Will Ossipton, and Arodes. I should relax for the next few days. Being overly tense might break me down and cause me to have symptoms of losing control. Klein turned to look at the full-body mirror in his room. Looking at his 1.8-meter tall build, black hair and brown eyes with a thin face and cut features, dressed in a white shirt, a suit with a bow tie, and a top hat that was matched with the pale gold sunbird brooch. He wore a calm expression with a deep, dark gaze. After looking at this in silence, he raised his hands and adjusted the buttons at his cuffs and patted his black suit. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the stacked, dark buildings ahead. Demon Hunter Colin Iliad, with two swords on his back, pointed ahead and said, "That's Afternoon Town." He combed his grizzled hair that was flying about in the wind that swept through the wilderness. "That's fast." With his axe of hurricane in hand, Derek sighed wistfully in surprise. He soon realized that it was reasonable. This was because the Giant King's Court was located somewhere near the City of Silver. Afternoon Town was the intersecting point that connected both nodes. With the lightning that illuminated the night sky, he clearly saw Afternoon Town in its entirety. It was built at the foot of a mountain and was naturally split into upper and lower levels. Instead of calling it a town, it wasn't much smaller than most of the ruins the City of Silver found. Here, the gray stones were stacked into different buildings. Some were entirely emptied out, nearing 10 meters. Some were similar to the residence Derek currently resided in. It was short, as though any normal person would hit their heads onto the ceiling. These buildings were arranged close together before spreading out. Some of them had collapsed, while a number remained standing despite showing signs of age and tear. It's completely different from what's described in the textbooks. Derek suddenly recalled the knowledge he had learned from his history lessons. According to the City of Silver's records, Afternoon Town was the door that separated reality from myth. It was a place where humans and giants lived together. There was day and night here, but most of the day was in a noon state. Regardless of the fog, storms, or snow, none of them were able to blot out the strong sunlight. But at this moment, it was dark and heavy. Even if the area was illuminated by light, it lacked a sense of brightness, and there was no signs of life. Clenching his axe tightly, Derek, whose eyes had two miniature suns, was on the flanks of the exploration team. He followed Chief Colin into Afternoon Town. This area had been cleared once on the first exploration. The streets were covered with signs of rotting flesh and dry pus. It was completely silent. "Be careful, there are many strange monsters lurking in the darkness." Colin Iliad, with his scarred face, didn't let down his guard. He drew one of his dual swords as the silver light on his sword converged. This is the mythical door. When the creator abandoned this piece of land, even the myths were abandoned. Derek couldn't help but imagine what Afternoon Town had experienced during the cataclysm. He instinctively felt that it was probably different from the Kingdom of Silver. Before he could carefully observe his surroundings in search of possible clues, he suddenly heard a teammate on the other flank anxiously cry out, "There's something." Derek turned his head and saw a transparent face growing out of the wall of a 10-meter-tall stone building. The face was filled with countless cracks. With great regularity, they spiraled around the center, forming a single eye or mouth that resembled a vortex. The hurricane within the vortex was corporeal as it spewed out with a howl. The dawn-like light from within was dense, as though they were arrows of light. Bam, bam, bam. They struck a few members of the exploration team, but they seemed to strike thick city walls. All they produced was dull and closely spaced out thuds before disappearing into the dark environment. At some point in time, City of Silver Chief, Colin Iliad, was genuflecting. He stabbed the silver sword in his hand into the rotting gray ground. He had provided the front row with the strongest protection. At the same time, the other members of the exploration team methodically unleashed their attacks. Hurricanes of light and scarlet fireballs struck the monster. Right on the heels of that, the holy light that Derek summoned had landed on the vortex that resembled a single eye. Amidst the explosive boom, the boulder, which was originally covered in cracks, collapsed. A transparent face screamed as it vaporized. Although the battle was simple, Derek didn't feel happy at all. He had heard Mr. Hanged Man and Miss Justice discuss cases of Beyonder fights. Matching it with the experience the City of Silver had accumulated from resisting all kinds of monsters from the darkness, he worriedly discovered that the City of Silver had a limited number of pathways. Those who were not demigods lacked effective means of control, and the situation from before proved this point. Thankfully, there are sealed artifacts that are formed when monsters die to make up for this. Derek silently thought as he heard the chief instruct, "Move according to plan. 3 to 4 people a group. Search and clear the different areas." "Yes, Chief." The exploration team members were mostly rich in experience. They soon formed their groups. Derek's group consisted of 3 people. Apart from him, there was Joshua and Haim, who had been to the abandoned temple with him before. The former was a Sequence 7 weapon master, and he had a mystical glove that could control fire. The latter was a recently advanced Sequence 6 Dawn Paladin. He was tall and reached a height of 2.3 meters. The City of Silver, which had warriors, also known as the Giant Pathway, as the main force, had an average height of 1.8 meters, including children above the age of 6. Even if the Beyonder characteristics were inherited, the normal genes that were modified had accumulated with each generation. Although Derek wasn't old, he was nearly 1.8 meters tall and still had room to grow. According to the designated targets, Derek, Joshua, and Haim entered an alley on the left in a triangular battle formation. They checked every building that still allowed entry. Perhaps as a result of the former sweep, they didn't encounter any monsters. They couldn't help but feel a little relieved. Rumor has it that the 6-member council plans to set up camp here and make Afternoon Town a stronghold. Joshua, who was wearing a scarlet glove on his left palm, said after observing the buildings. Haim nodded and looked down at his 2 partners. "The true target seems to be." He pointed diagonally upwards. "The Giant King's Court," Derek asked in surprise. "Isn't it a search for the sea where Jack and company came from? Don't we need to circle the Giant King's Court?" Derek was filled with puzzlement. Haim shook his head. "I've only heard rumors." He swept his gaze and pointed at the entrance to the underground chamber. "Let's finish our search here." Derek answered tersely. With his night vision and ability to emit light, he wasn't afraid of the darkness as he stepped into the underground chamber first. Haim lifted an animal hide lantern while Joshua followed closely in tow. This building's underground chamber was rather wide, with traces of dried, blackening pools. The smell of blood remained despite the many years that had passed. Derek surveyed the area and suspected that a sacrificial ritual had once been held here. A very, very long time ago. He silently added and discovered a candle left on the stone table which resembled an altar. He felt more certain about his guesses. Why would the residents of Afternoon Town secretly hold sacrificial rituals in their underground basement? When the Giant King's court was in power, they were believers of the Giant King. Later, they came under the Lord that created everything. The owner of this building secretly worshipped other gods. Questions arose in him as Derek approached the altar. He saw that the stone table was originally carved with words, but they had been damaged by either natural or unnatural elements. After some careful identification, Derek found 3 names: Ouroboros, Medici, Sasrier. Ouroboros? Isn't that the name of the angel of fate? Mr. Fool mentioned before that Medici is also a king of angels. Sasrier is another one. Derek suddenly felt excited and horrified as he hurriedly turned his head to shout out for his companions to take a look. But in his vision, the underground chamber was empty. There was only darkness. Haim and Joshua, who were supposed to be behind him, were gone.